Hi, Mateusz here. Welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about a watch that, whether you like it or not, has become something of a phenomenon. Ciga Design Hunter. No matter what you think about the way it looks, or how you feel about Chinese watchmaking in general, and no matter how you approach the moral side of buying Chinese products, if such a thing even applies when we're talking about watches, it's impossible not to notice how the boundaries we once thought were fixed keep quietly collapsing. What used to feel like a line that could never be crossed keeps getting crossed. And the Ciga Design Hunter is a perfect reflection of that shift. A watch that shows very clearly how far things have come. Let's start with how it looks, because that's the first thing anyone notices. Well, maybe right after the price, but we'll get to that later. The Hunter's design immediately brings to mind Richard Mille, and that's usually the first comment you'll hear about it. The poor man's Richard Mille, or a ripoff. And while that's the obvious association, I think it's about time we stop calling every watch in this aesthetic a Richard Mille clone. Every now and then in watchmaking something truly new appears. Something that doesn't just follow a trend, but creates one, becomes a reference point for years to come. Richard Mille did exactly that. He took the tonneau case shape that had existed for over a century, and which had been brought back to life in the 1990s by Frank Muller, who made it modern, daring, even fashionable, and then added another layer entirely, a high-tech, architectural sportiness, skeletonized mechanics, and that almost shameless marketing approach that used the price tag as part of the brand identity. The result was a cultural phenomenon. Richard Mille watches became symbols of status, tickets to a world of absurd wealth, and whether we like them or not, they defined an entire era. So of course imitators followed, and just like what happened with Panerai or with Audemars Piguet and the Royal Oak, a whole new genre was born. It's funny to think that not long ago, before COVID, every single watch on an integrated bracelet was called a Royal Oak alternative or a Royal Oak homage. Now it's simply a category, a part of the design language we take for granted. The Royal Oak remains the godfather of the genre, but we've stopped seeing every angular steel watch as an imitation. And I think the same thing needs to happen with the aesthetic Richard Mille created. It's become part of the collective vocabulary of watch design. Even if Richard Mille disappeared tomorrow, that style would continue to exist, because it has already entered the canon. The challenge, however, is that this kind of design isn't easy to pull off without looking ridiculous. Anyone can make a watch with an integrated bracelet. The construction itself isn't particularly demanding, but making a convincing Richard Mille style piece is different, because you need the right kind of movement. You can't just take a cheap, mass-produced caliber, skeletonize it and hope for the best. You can, technically, but the result looks miserable, and it completely misses the point of what makes that aesthetic work. Sure, even a simple movement can be turned into a small piece of art with enough effort. But that effort costs money, and that's why watches in this style have always been expensive. Alternatives existed, but they were rarely much cheaper. The entry barrier was just too high. And that's where Ciga Design enters the story. Because what they've done with the Hunter is something that honestly shouldn't be possible. Even compared to other Chinese brands, this one stands out as an anomaly, something that just doesn't fit the normal logic of this industry. If you try to imagine a world without Chinese watches and then think of what it would take to build a proper Richard Mille style watch with a movement actually designed for this kind of open architecture, the cost would be astronomical. We can look at examples: Hublot Big Bang, Bianchi, Custos, or modern Frank Muller's. They all start well into four figures. And yet, here we are, with a watch that costs around $500, sometimes even less. That's entry-level money. But for that, you get a movement purpose-built for a skeletonized watch, a real architectural design where every component is visible and finished in a way that doesn't look cheap or rushed. It's sandblasted with polished bridge edges, cleanly assembled, and the case follows the same design logic. Matte surfaces, subtle polished highlights, all executed to a surprisingly high standard. Even when you look closely into the small gaps between the layers of the case, you don't see rough machining or careless work. Conceptually and technically, it's a very impressive object. Even if you strip away the initial shock value, it's hard not to admire how well thought out this design is. The layout of the movement, the positioning of the balance wheel and the mainspring, the geometry of the bridges, the restrained branding, everything feels deliberate, intentional, and coherent. But being impressive as a concept doesn't necessarily mean it's an impressive watch. And as a watch, I'll be honest, it's not something I particularly enjoy. It's simply not my kind of aesthetic. I never dreamed of owning a Richard Mille. I don't like big or flashy watches, though I've always appreciated well-done skeleton design. And that's the part that gives me some joy here, the craftsmanship behind the skeletonization. But that joy doesn't last long. It's one of those pieces I like to put on for a day, smile at, and then put away for a while. Visually, the case construction feels over-designed to me, as if bumpers were welded onto a central shell. I understand the idea behind it, but it's not something I connect with. I think this would have been a far more elegant watch if they had stopped at that central core and kept the rest simple. As for the dimensions, it's not a watch that can be summed up with a single number. It's 43 mm across, 48 from lug to lug, and just 12 thick. It's definitely large, visually dominant, a watch that takes command of the wrist. But ergonomically, it's surprisingly compact, and I don't think you need a huge wrist to pull it off. It's loud by design, but not uncomfortable. If you like the style, it'll probably fit you just fine. It takes standard 22 mm straps, which gives you endless options. And Ciga Design also offers a matching bracelet. It looks consistent with the watch, though I don't find it as well made as the case itself. Still, given the price, it's perfectly acceptable, maybe even slightly better than I expected. Now, about the movement. Its declared accuracy is between -15 and +20 seconds per day, and my unit performs somewhere between -15 and +5. Officially, it's called in-house. When I tried to ask a company representative for more details, I didn't get anything beyond the press release. And I'm quite certain that this is what we might call in-house in the modern marketing sense, meaning not a movement made by the brand, but one made for the brand. I don't particularly like that kind of linguistic gymnastics, but that's simply how the industry works now. I wish the term still meant what it used to, but it doesn't. And I think it's important not to take such claims at face value. If a watch brand truly manufactures its own calibers, they show it. If they finish components by hand, they show it. That's how this world works. Everyone loves to brag, even about the smallest things. So if a company claims something significant and doesn't back it up with footage or details, I tend to assume it's marketing, not miracle work. If there's one rule I'd suggest to anyone getting into watches, it's this: believe nothing until you see the proof. The Hunter also has luminescent hands, technically. The lume doesn't really glow, but the matte-colored surfaces make the hands legible enough in daylight, and without that, reading the time would be nearly impossible. And now, the last specification: water resistance, 30 meters. That, to me, is a big missed opportunity. In a watch that's supposed to look ultra-modern, technical, even sporty, water resistance should have been one of the priorities. It's not something you expect to see at the bottom of the spec sheet. Of course, for someone who buys it as a statement piece, something to wear occasionally, 3 ATM won't be a deal breaker, but I think the potential of this watch would have been much greater if it had been rated for 100 meters. And that's where I will stop. Ciga Design Hunter isn't a watch for me. Its design simply doesn't resonate with me. But if it does with you, if you like such aesthetics, if you like what it represents, I strongly believe that you will not be disappointed, because as a watch, it's a great product, but you know, it's all about the preferences. So that's it for today. Thank you for watching and see you next time.